Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. I thought I would do a video that I've kind of avoided to this point in time, and that's on media. I'm a firm believer in kind of making do with whatever I have, and if I didn't have something, I don't want to have to rely on something specific if it's not available or I just don't happen to have it when I'm working on a given assignment or a project or whatever it might be. But that being said, I've finally gotten around to just think, okay, I'm just going to show people exactly what I have and what I use on my scenes. And by no means is this a recommendation video, but I'm going to show you what I use, and I'll give you the reasons why I use it, okay? Now, that being said, there's a lot of media that I use just because I happen to have it. I picked it up at some point in time. I didn't do any, I didn't do research on it or something like that. If there was a color that I saw that I liked at the store, I would just buy it, okay? I haven't come across, a certain line of inks that I don't like. There are a certain size of pads that I don't like. I don't like a real small one because I use a lot of ink, as you've seen in my videos. So I tend to avoid kind of those real small, like little tiny cube ones. But that's not because I don't like the inks. It's just because of my application of the inks. Those little tiny cases really aren't for me. Okay, with that being said, let's get right into it. As you know, if you've watched some of my videos, I really like Marvy inks, okay? I started using Marvy inks in the form of the pens, the brush markers, such as these, back in the 80s, okay? I used to work for a stamp in the hand company, and they use these a lot. People like D. Grunig from Posh Impressions used Marvy markers. And I would say most people that stamped back in those days, if they didn't have Marvys, they had things like La Plume, Tombow pens, they were double-sided, dye-based markers, okay? But these ones were really good in terms of coloring, all right? Large surfaces, and they're wide tips, and they really hold a lot of ink, okay? Then people started coming out with raised dye-based pads, okay? And Marvy came along with the Marvy matchables. They call them matchables because the colors of their pads, like this is a number 60 salvia blue, matched the 60 salvia blue pen, all right? Now there's a lot more of these markers than there are pads. I think there was 100 and something pens, and I think the first line, yeah, it says it right here, 30 colors available. They released 30 of those colors, and then they came out with about 10 more, and I think 5 after that, so there might be 45 different colors of pads, I'm not sure. And then they also have the re-inkers in those colors. Okay, now what Marvy has done is they have discontinued the Marvy matchable pad line with the color-coded cases. Now you can just buy a blank case, and they have all the re-inkers for all of the pads that they used to have, and you just ink up your pad with whatever color you want, okay? And those are really great inks. For one, they're really saturated and deep and rich in their colors, and the consistency is nice in the way that I use them because they're thinner than most inks out there. Okay, this was an existing ink line that they had to kind of come out with a configuration for the case that suited that existing ink. Okay, so they made the inks as best they could, but they had to come out with a pad. Now most pads that are fabric pads, okay? But what Marvy has done is they came out with a really dense foam pad, okay? And that's the reason why, is because, if you have this pad stored on its side, the ink's not going to run out of it because it's Stain and Tack in that, that foam vehicle. Those pads are really great for that purpose. All right, so I kind of almost forgot what I was going to say. If you get the re-inkers for those Marvy inks that they have, let's say, and you don't have these color-coded cases, there might be other blank pads from other companies, but I would use the Marvy blanks for the Marvy inks because of that thin consistency of them, okay? All right, now the pads that I tend to have, and I'm going to write down, I'll type in the notes section for this video. If you click on the Show More little tab underneath this video, it'll expand, and I'll go into the different colors that I would tend to use. I used to use 24 pads in my workshops, and I felt that was a full range of tones, okay? Now, as I said, I like the Marvy pads, but I'm just going to type out, the ones that I would, probably get before any other colors, out of the 45, 24 or so. But let's say, in a line of, in a value range of a given hue, if you have certain colors already in other pad incarnations, other brands, other lines, then you really don't need it. But I find that having one or two colors in each hue and value range, okay, of ink, it's good to have a Marvy one of it because it penetrates the paper really well after you've laid down pad ink or inks from another company. All right? All right, let me explain that. These other pads and lines of pads that I use, all right, I've found them all to be thick inks, okay? These inks were conceived for the purpose of not running out of a felt pad. Hold on a second, I have someone at the door. Okay, I'm back. I just received a battery for this camera, so I don't need to worry about batteries anymore when I'm doing these videos. It has an AC plug-in coming out of my camera, so anyway. Okay, these inks have been conceived for these raised dye-based applications of the inks. So the inks are typically thicker, all right? Now, I like Memento inks. I mean, I haven't met a pad that I don't like, so what I typically look at, is not really the line of inks, but more of the color. If there's a color that I just don't seem to have in Marvy form, then I've typically picked it up if I've been in a store and I've seen something that I don't like. I don't know. If I if I had the space and I don't know, I was just didn't worry about that, I would probably end up with every ink pad out there, But anyways, that being said, like the Distress inks, I love that entire line. The versions of the hue that they have, it's just different than, a lot of the colors that are already out there. A lot of the colors that are out there in pad form, or in just ink lines, from any company, they're typically really bright. I like the Distressed inks because of kind of their purpose. It's supposed to look aged, right? So I like this green that they have, this peeled paint. I really like that that color, that version of green. So I think that goes really well with the greens that I already had in Marvy form. Okay, but like Memento and Distress, this is by Tsukaneko, and Ranger, those inks are typically thick inks, okay? The thick inks go well with the fabric pad, okay? I think that's fabric on there as opposed to a sponge. I could see the fabric on there, okay? But to, in order for those not to run out of the pad, they have to make the inks a little bit thicker, all right? That being said, thick inks are really great in the layered dye-based ink application because if you use them as a foundation, the thinner inks of the Marvy pads spread really nicely on them, okay? I could use Marvy by itself just fine, but it requires a little bit more finesse. But if I have something like a Memento or Distress Ink foundation, it provides kind of a coating over the surface of the paper, and it allows these thinner inks to spread really nicely on them, where if you use Marvy just straight on glossy paper by itself, if you kind of make a mark across the page, it's soaking into the page almost instantly, where the Memento, Distress, and some of the other lines will kind of sit on the surface of the glossy cardstock a little bit longer, and it allows you to spread it out, okay? That's why I always recommend in my scenes to really put a good coating down of those thicker inks, okay? And that allows your darker inks to come a little bit more time to spread out, okay? I don't want it sopping wet, but it provides that nice foundation and, I don't know, kind of a damp surface for other colors to spread nicely. And that reason why is because we typically work from light to dark, and when you're working light to dark, you don't want something like that, you know, to be showing on your scene. Not that you would do something like that, but, you know, if you're just kind of spreading something out, this is just, you know, copy paper right here. You want it to spread out nice and smoothly. Okay, what colors do I get? I like a range of values in the different hues, okay? And like I said, it doesn't have to be all Marvy, okay? It could be, you know, you can mix and match with other companies. Like, this is the Marvy line of blues. We have light, mediums, and darks right here, right? But let's say I didn't have the Salvia blue, or I already had the Memento blue from Memento. You know, the Summer Sky, that could be used in here. Danube blue right here instead of the number 3 blue from Marvy. Prussian blue. And here we have a nice range of that given hue, right? I love blues. I could probably, I don't know, I could probably get 12 blues from various lines and I wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't have enough if I saw another one, in other words. Here's some tans and browns, okay, really great for nature. Pale orange, brown, and dark brown. And I'll put the numbers and names of this in the notes section again. But say if I didn't have pale orange, maybe the Memento Desert Sand would look good, okay? You see how that looks right here? It's a good range of values, okay? It's light, medium, and dark. Greens, you can never have enough greens in scenic stamping. Here's that peeled paint, all right? Where does that fit in? It's probably something like a, oh, this is a celery right here. We can go with something like that. I don't use this one too much, the yellow-green, but it's a pretty good one. It's because that yellow-green came out after light green was already out there, and in my workshop supplies I already had the light green in there. All right, values, just neutral values, gray and black. All right, London Fog is excellent from Memento. Now I just happen to have, you know, in my pad collection here, it's just dominated by like Ranger inks, the Mementos, and Marvy, okay? I've had other pads in the past. Some of them have been discontinued, like Vivid pads or something like that, so I'm not going to show those. Violet tones, okay, pinks and purples. I don't do too many scenes that are just like pink dominated, but I often do scenes that have some violet tones in them, or a sunset scene where you have yellows, oranges, pinks, and whatnot, okay? And I'll get to mixing here in a minute. Warm tones, all right? But here's the little thing on something like this, okay? If you know some basics on color blending, then you'll know that, let's say if I don't have orange, but let's say I had a pink and yellow, because dye-based inks are transparent, all right, the color underneath is going to influence what you see. Oh, this pad's crumbling. I need to replace it. But you can see here's an orange right here, right? Because of the pink and the yellow. Okay? So, if you have a pink and yellow, or it could be a pink and yellow from a different company or whatever, then maybe you don't need to get orange. Or you can get orange as a secondary color. You know, you can start off with more of your, you know, kind of primary colors, all right? Let's say there's this orchid right here, all right? If you know some basics of color blending again, the pink and a light blue would probably form a violet tone, okay? So that's the beauty of dye-based inks as well. We're not just, and when you're layering them like we do, or like I do, in the scenes, then you don't always have to look at your pad as a singular color, okay? You can look at them as the existing color, and you can take these all the way down to white depending on how much of that ink you apply, but you can also mix with other colors, okay? And you can get all of those secondary colors, and then when you start layering, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 layers of tones down in various amounts of whatever you use, the spectrum and value range that you can achieve is practically limitless, you know, if you have an existing number of colors. So if you have 24 pads or something like that, and I know a lot of you do out there, you know, by the time you start layering these and mixing and matching, we're talking about an infinite number of combinations. And it's not just used, again, in their full saturations, okay? I can get this green here, and I can use it very lightly, like this, and I can get a lighter green, right? So we're taking those various amounts of that green and mixing it with whatever, a blue to get a turquoise. You know, you can get a full range of turquoise, going from the darkest turquoise, you know, where you use the green in its full saturation and a blue in its full saturation, down to a very minimal amount, okay? So, that being said, we're talking about a lot of variations using in just how you use those existing inks. All right, inks. Thin inks, thicker inks. They work great in combination with one another, all right? I didn't mention the Adirondack Lights. Some of these inks, this line has been completely discontinued, okay? But you can still find some of it out there. I did a search, you know, over this last few months. Anytime someone says, hey, Adirondack inks are discontinued, and if I do a little search, you know, sometimes websites still show up that have these, okay? And sometimes if they don't have them, but they might have the re-inkers for them, okay? These Adirondack Lights are really pale, pale colors, okay? They were shadow stamping inks. But the way that I use them in a really full saturation, so if you can find re-inkers in Adirondack colors, that's a good way to go. I would almost recommend the re-inkers more than the pads, because there's just going to be a lot more ink in here. And I use them with the applicators anyways, you know. I rarely take a stamp, if ever, and take it and make an impression out of it. That's not what I use these Adirondack Lights for. Alright? Okay, so inks, dye-based inks. One of the things that I find sometimes when people ask me to do a critique, you know, they send me in the scene, they say, hey, you know, I'd really like you to take a look at the scene. Can you tell me what I need to do? Now, sometimes what I see in scenes that I think could use an immediate improvement isn't anything to do with any technique that the person has done, but sometimes the value of their black ink, all right, is more of a like a dark gray, like a 90% or sometimes even like an 80% gray. And I think that that alone can really add a lot of depth and detail and vibrancy into their scene if they're using a nice dark black. Now, everyone has their own version of dark blacks that they like, it seems. We once did a survey at a stamping retreat that that I was at, and I don't know, there were, I think people throughout, there was like 5 different pads that came out, that came up amongst about, I don't know, 15 of us or so. Some people liked Memories inks a lot. I love Memories. It's so deep and dark and black, okay? It's a real rich tone. But what I found was, my pad's here a little bit loose. This is a really old pad. What I found was if I stamped out my imagery in the Memories and I didn't wait a while for it to dry, I couldn't apply my other colors on top of it too soon. I mean, you can heat set it or something like that, but it tended to smear a little bit. But Ken Pesci, who lives in Arizona, really loves Memories, and I really, you know, I listen to him a lot in terms of media. Out there, it's more arid, so he never had any problem with that. So it kind of depends on where you are. But like I said, if you have a heat tool or something like that that's sitting on your desk at all times, then no big deal to just kind of, you know, spend 10 seconds and just dry it off. But that being said, sometimes when I'm stamping my scenes and I want a real deep, you know, rich, thick black for my foreground imagery to really stand up against all of the imagery and colors that I've laid in the background, I'll often go with a Memories ink, especially if the scene got, you know, quite dark. Then Memories would really come in handy. As far as my main imagery and my main black, it's the Marvy black. I find it to be nice and dark and rich and deep, and also it's of that thinner variety, so when I stamp it onto my glossy cardstock, even though it's the first object that I'm stamping, it absorbs really fast, okay, into the paper, and I'm able to, you know, start on with my scene and coloring and whatnot very quickly, okay? The thicker inks, you know, you might have to wait a little bit before you kind of start coloring over them, because those inks could potentially stay a little bit more damp, and it might take a little bit longer for those thicker inks to penetrate the surface. I mean, that would make sense, right? I don't know how long that would be, or if anyone's run into that. Anyways, if you have, maybe make a comment in the comment section here, or you can make some recommendations for what you like. There's a lot of media out there that's coming out all the time that I'm unaware of, but a lot more people are in tune with, okay? All right, the Versafine is the same type of thing. That's an instant dry pigment ink. Well, I don't find it instantly drying when I'm stamping it on glossy cardstock, but it does dry over time. But sometimes when I want a really thick saturation, and it stamps a beautiful impression with that real fine, I don't know, whatever it is, ink in there, it really gives a nice crisp, but I don't know, I guess it is kind of a thicker ink, it feels like, in consistency to me, but very, very black. So it stands out against the background really nicely, and I really like that one, as well as the Memories, okay? Okay, switching over to pigment inks. I don't use a lot of colored pigment inks, but if you've seen me doing some of these scenes, I use the Colorbox Frost White pad a lot, and I love it. It's a slow-drying pigment ink, and even though I'm applying it to glossy cardstock, which pigment inks are known to not dry on unless you're using something like the Brilliance ones, which dry pretty quickly no matter what you stamp them on or apply them to. The Frost White is slow drying on glossy cardstocks, alright, but that for me Let's see here. For me, it allows me to really kind of spread it around in here. And also because of its nature, if I don't like it, I can kind of rub it off. Now this is a scene that I stamped out yesterday. And this is kind of chalky on here, but I can kind of rub some of that ink off if I've applied too much, okay? But as I'm applying it when it's wet onto my cardstock, I'm doing it in a very dry brush application, and it allows me time to kind of spread it out or to remove it if need be. If I've applied it too much and it doesn't look good, it allows me to take it right off, okay? And that's what's great about the Frost White from Colorbox and that style of slow drying ink. Alright, now my applicator for those Colorbox inks, or that Colorbox ink, is just a cotton swab. And I like to go with cotton because those acrylic ones or whatever they're made out of, they're too tightly bound. And when I'm going for something, a real soft application of something, I want to have a real soft applicator. And not only is the applicator kind of soft, but I kind of fray it, okay, so that it's really kind of soft and loose on the surface. And then when I apply it in a very light touch, okay, it goes on slowly and softly for those soft applications, okay? You don't want big thick balls of paint everywhere. That's too much ink and too tight of a tip, you know, that you're applying it with, okay? Okay, so those are my ink choices. Well, those are the inks that I tend to use. Going over to, remember, back to the pens, sometimes I supplement with pens. Let's say if I want to color a tree, I wouldn't do it in blue. Well, maybe if it's a winter kind of cool colored scene, I might do it in blues, but if I want to color something, you know, and have it stamp out with an inherent kind of a color scheme, then just using one pad on here is just going to give me one monochromatic and mono value impression, okay? So sometimes I'll ink it up with a pad, and I'll go back in and I'll add some little highlights with maybe a lighter. In this case, if I was doing green, I might, you know, if this was a lighter green, I might put some lighter highlights on there to stamp it out so that it has multiple values and sometimes different hue, okay, in a given impression. All right. Everyone knows about alcohol inks. There's a lot of different brands out there now. Well, I don't know if there's a lot. I don't know, is there 6 brands of alcohol inks out there? There might even be more. I was looking online for different pens, and I noticed there's some different brands out there. Not your name brands, but this one happens to be the Marvy Plume. Someone sent these to me, and I've loved them. If I didn't have these ones, you know, Copic markers would be really great. But, I don't know, there were 2 sets here. I have no idea what that says right here, but various values of given hue, just like I do with, you know, pads. I like light, mediums, and darks. When I'm using these pens, though, I probably use the real light ones about 90% of the time, and then maybe some medium ones the other 9%. And if I've even used these kind of darker ones in here before, I don't remember, because I'm kind of supplementing what I do with dye-based inks, and I don't want some kind of real harsh, you know, pen color on there. So the way that I use them, you know, I really like these kind of pale colors, pale value colors, just to kind of go in and detail certain parts of probably a small object, like in here, like this cabin right here. I didn't use alcohol markers on this because I did this scene before alcohol markers were even out there, but you know, this stylus tool can only get in, you know, to certain areas so much. You know, it's quite easy to take a pen and to, you know, color that those small areas with a, you know, a fine point or fine point brush marker or something of that sort. Alright, so there's all kinds of different alcohol-based markers out there. There's the dual-tipped ones, which are really fantastic. Gives you a variety of marks that you can make, but I like the brush tip ones the most, and I like them in lighter values. Alright, browns, greens, a couple blues would be really good. And that's kind of the majority that I do. Sometimes I do gray. Okay, going to other pens, you know, just things like this. Gel pen markers, white gel pen. White gel pen would be my main gel pen ballpoint roller. But, you know, I'll go into a store and I'll see a set of like these Sharpie paint pens, you know, I don't know, a couple years ago or a year ago, whenever I bought them. And these are really fun, you know, if you have like a meadow or a green meadow, it's kind of fun to go in and add in little pink flowers or something like that to add some variation. Green here, blue, you know, for kind of more subdued stars in the sky or something like that, rather than just going all with white. A golden color scene or something like that, looking over a body of water with little, you know, sparkling specular light, you know, shining off the water. You know, it's fantastic to add in some little gold highlights in there. If I have a kind of a cool colored scene with moonlight, silver is really fantastic for that. And then you get into the specialty types of markers. I don't know when I got these. Sakura, luminous gel ink. I used those recently, and they actually worked after, I don't know, never using them for probably 10 or 15 years. But anyways, where you would use these types of gel pens, you can use something like that if you want to have a little bit of extra pop. You know, you can even use glitter pens or something like that, which if I saw in the store, I would probably buy. I don't know. I don't have them here, but anyway. Color applicators. I should have went into this after I went into the inks. Colorbox stylus tool. I use the white oval tips. Alright, it's not white anymore because I've already used it, but these are really great to use as color applicators, okay? Just about any tip would do, but you know, I think the oval one is probably better than something like a heart tip, you know, in terms of color applications go. I don't know, there's this leaf shape one that has a pointed tip too, but almost anything would work in terms of that application. Ovals, I think, are the most ideal for my purpose, okay? I don't have any right here on my desk, but there's those cosmetic sponges that I've used in another video before. If you don't have, you know, a stylus tool, you don't have to have it, okay? I find things like those kind of inexpensive but dense foam cosmetic makeup sponges that come in those wedge forms, okay? Those work pretty good, and they're kind of the same type of material as these oval foam tips, you know, but when you're using kind of a cosmetic sponge, it's not quite as ergonomic feeling as something like this that feels just like a regular pen in your hand, okay? It's very comfortable. Alright, switching tips out, you just kind of push in the back of this. That pops right out. It's ready to go, okay? Don't scrub with these back and forth, and I have a video showing on what not to do with these tips. Otherwise, you'll rip the tip in that type of ink application that we do, okay? Alright, now, everyone knows about cling foam mounted stamps, I'm sure. I use a lot of wood-mounted ones, but I usually use a lot of unmounted stamps. With cling foam stamps, you know, you want to just have a good collection of sizes of acrylic blocks, okay? I have a lot of large stamps, so the large ones really come in handy for that. This is a cling foam stamp that comes out of our sets. Sets also come in unmounted form. But let's say we have an unmounted stamp, it's just rubbers, and that is just not going to stick to an acrylic block. Clear stamps stick to acrylic blocks. Those aren't real red rubber, okay? But that being said, I use this material called Tack and Peel. I think it's by Nakagawa. and you apply it. See this thing right here on this board, or this acrylic block? It's tacky, so that this will just stick right on there for a temporary mounting system. Okay, so I have that in various sizes. I have one small one that's even smaller than that somewhere around here. But these blocks work really great. Okay, and this, I don't know, this part is for people that just haven't done this before. Tack and peel works really great. It starts to become less sticky over time, but all you have to do is, if that happens, you run it over, you know, under a sink in cold water, wipe it off because it has some dust on here, okay? Or whatever it is. Oils from my hand, maybe. And it will regain its tackiness. Just don't dry it off with a paper towel or something like that. Let it just air dry and drip dry, and it's ready to go again. It's super sticky, so. And it really lasts for a long time, and even if it gets ink stained, you know, which they inevitably will, it doesn't matter. They're still going to be tacky. This one's getting less tacky. I need to run it under the sinks, but I see a lot of dust on it. All right. So your collection of acrylic blocks, mine happen to have the tack and peel on them so that I don't have to cling mat foam mount every one of the stamps. Okay, I use stamps from other companies too, and I buy them in unmounted form, but instead of kind of mounting them on cling foam and cutting them all out, I just use the tack and peel on those blocks. So I use the tack and peel on one side, and I can put, you know, let me see, it has this little protective plastic. You want to keep that plastic, and okay, an unmounted stamp or a cling foam stamp will stick to this plastic, or you can just use the other side of this block for that purpose with the cling foam stamps. All right, now one of the more kind of obscure kind of crafting mediums out there, not for people that use it like calligraphers, but the bleed-proof white is another, you know, kind of new favorite medium of mine, and they're inexpensive. I don't know when I bought this, but this one was $4.15. That, I think this is the same bottle that I've been using for like 20 years, literally. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's more, maybe it's 30 years or something like that. I think it is, because I got it in college. But bleed-proof white, it will dry out on here, and sometimes I've gotten like 10 years and it's completely dry, but you just add water to it, and it reconstitutes. You just kind of mix it up and use it again, and it'll dry out, and, you know, you just want to, you know, add a few drops in there. And the brush that I've been using is just your average, you know, brush. This one's number 2, which has to do with the tip, you know, size right there, but I'm really loving the bleed-proof white in for details in my scenes. And for, where did it go? Here we go. The all-important high-tech paint splattering tool, and which is another name, used toothbrush, okay? And that's what I'm doing. That's what I did in my last scene. Where did it go? Here we go. Just adding kind of that splashy look right in here. And it's just taking your brush with some bleed-proof white on it and splattering it in there, you know, pulling the toothbrush back like that, the bristles, and it splatters that paint in there. And that is a really fun technique. I remember doing that as like a kid or something like that, or I don't know, to create stars, I think, maybe. Anyways, really fun stuff. Okay, I think that is it. I didn't go into things like scratchboard or stamp board or something like that, but that's the media that I use. And again, I'll post whatever I mentioned in the description area of this video. But anyways, trying to think of other things. Oh, paper, sorry. The paper that I'm using is a King James cast coat. King James is no longer available, but I've done some glossy paper tests recently, and the chrome coat works just fine. You can find that out there. Chrome coat is spelled K-R-O-M-E-K-O-T-E, and again, I'll put that in the comments section, okay? But you can find other videos that I've done in the past on paper and paper tests if you want to see what the different media looks like on a given surface, and that can really vary, you know, depending on what type of paper you're stamping on. Surprisingly so. Not all glossy cardstocks are made the same. They all work. They work differently though, especially in combination with the different media that you're applying on top of them, okay? So anyways, again, I hope this comes in handy for those that are curious about it. Sorry it was kind of long-winded, but when I do something on a given subject matter, I just kind of want to get it all in and not really have to do it again, okay? So that's my take on media at this point in time. It is September of 2017, and if I change, you know, into a different ink at some point in time or whatever, or if I supplement more things, maybe I'll post it in the notes section below here. So anyways, hope that comes in handy again, and hope you like that long drawn out video on it.